You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Filmmaking Conversations with Damian Swaby. Listen to conversations with award-winning filmmakers, directors from the golden age of television, and creatives from the indie film community who continue to inspire the next generation of filmmakers. And now, over to your host, Damian Swaby.
How are you today? How are you doing, Sarah?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing fine. I've wanted to speak to you for a while. Luckily, we were able to speak tonight,
Yes.
this evening in my neck of the woods. And you're obviously in Chicago. Am I right by saying?
Yep. I'm on the suburbs of Chicago, and it's early afternoon here, and a pretty decent summer day, not too hot. So that's something to be grateful for.
Excellent. Obviously, I'm here. I'm based in London, and we have listeners all across the globe for Filmmaking Conversations. But some of us who are unaware of what the suburbs of Chicago are like, tell us, what's that like?
Well, it's definitely dependent on which suburb you're from. I'm from a town called Naperville, Illinois, which is probably like a 30-minute train ride to the city. So a lot of Chicago transplants who are looking for a bigger yard and a place to raise their family and things like that, but then still commute into Chicago. But there's some really fun downtown kitschy kinds of places and local mom and pop type stores. And then there's, of course, the typical sort of American chains and big box stores and things like that. So it's nice that we sort of have the convenience of that, and then also some local things and places that we can call our own.
The best of both worlds, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And what took you to Chicago? What drew you to move to that neck of the woods?
Well, I'm actually was from around here, born in another suburb just a little bit south of here. And so Illinois is the state that Chicago is in. And it's definitely just been my home for the majority of my entire life, except a small 2-year stint in grad school when I went to nearby Indiana, which is right next door.
Oh, so you really know the area, and it's really a part of you. And you've
Absolutely.
obviously been there your whole life, and you started a family in the area. Am I right by saying?
Yep. And so been here, started out as a speech therapist, a very different kind of career than filmmaker. And met my husband around 2005, and we got married in 2007 and had 2 children.
2 children.
Yeah.
Excellent. Nice. So what makes a speech therapist become a filmmaker?
Well, it was not a road I ever anticipated for a lot of reasons. Speech pathology is a pretty type A, exactly how it's going to go, not a lot of surprises. But unfortunately, life isn't always like that. And my husband, who was the filmmaker and had been for a number of years, had a unexpected medical event happen to him that ended him up in the hospital for a good portion of 8 months on and off. And unfortunately, he lost that medical battle in July of 2020. And I felt very compelled to make sure that the stories that he was working on currently continued to go on. And ones that were not finished were really important for me to finish. And so through, his incredible filmmaking community and mentor, they sort of guided me into this route, and I haven't looked back, and now definitely consider myself a filmmaker more than a speech pathologist.
So sorry to hear about what happened with your husband, many regards in that case, but what exactly was he working on, and why exactly did he pass away?
Yeah, so he was working on a film about a condition that was primarily being focused on the US, but it's happening internationally. That is very similar to polio. So if you're familiar with polio, that was an epidemic in, the early part of the century, it's very much like sporadically kids are getting sick and then experiencing paralysis. And not just paralysis where there's maybe weakness or, difficulty with walking a little bit, but very severe paralysis it's making them unable to move from, say, the neck down. And nobody could figure out why this was happening. It wasn't polio. It wasn't the polio virus. And they were seeing an increase in cases from, every other year, which was odd too, of 2014, 2016, 2018. The cases kept growing exponentially, impacting mostly all kids. And so these families are really on the forefront of this unknown condition, not only having to navigate their own personal tragedy and medical issues, but also trying to advocate for that condition so that they can figure out what's going on, what the condition is, how can we get a cure and make sure that this doesn't happen to other families.
Amazing. What drew your husband to that condition that people are going through?
Yeah, it was kind of just a random encounter. He was very much into, obviously, storytelling and was at a live storytelling event one night. And there happened to be a chair of public health from a university nearby. And she said, I know this family and I'm aware of this condition because I'm in the public health sphere. And it's something that needs the power of storytelling to get people's attention. I think a lot of people, especially after COVID, get very, they just want to turn a blind eye to medical things because they're hard to look at and they're hard to examine. But there's stories behind those conditions, and not only tragic stories, but also stories of hope and resilience and transformation. So he definitely was all about stories that would create a lasting impact and change the world for good. And that definitely was something that this story hit on.
Why do you think your late husband was someone who was about stories that would make an impact? And when we deal in making stories that would make an impact, it brings some sort of emotional pressure in regards to the decisions we make as filmmakers. Did you get any sense of any emotional pressures he felt making this documentary?
I think he's drawn to those stories because that was just the kind of person he was. It was very much not considering personal achievements or glory or wanted any of the recognition at all. It was very much how much connection and power story holds, and that, we're all human beings and we all have a story, and some of those stories are needing to be told and people don't have the resources or the spotlight to tell them. And so when you think about vulnerable populations, kids are one of the most vulnerable and have difficulty telling their own story. So that was one thing that I think he was definitely drawn to. And as far as emotional, yes, he was very much got so connected to the characters that he was filming in this family. He really only spent 3 days with them to start filming a pitch film to get more funding to make the full documentary. And by the time that he left working with them, he was like family with them and, kept in contact through his illness. And I obviously still keep in touch with them. And it's just been, an amazing relationship that's come out of this spark of an idea for a film.
Everything comes to an end when people are in hospital. I've been in hospital myself and had family members in hospital, which are not nice things to go through. How much of an impact did it have on the filmmaking process itself when he was in hospital, especially considering that you yourself now have taken over the reins of finishing this film?
Yeah, it's definitely something that we spoke about. And as far as how it impacted him as he continued to think about it, was he got the perspective of what these young kids had to go through as far as the pain and the fear and the unknowns that come along with having a condition and being subjected to, being away from your normal life and being in the hospital. So as he was in the hospital, I had mentioned to him a few times, it seems like your story is starting to integrate with this story that you started out to make. Maybe this is something we should start filming. And being who he was very much like, no, this is not about me. This is about, the kids. But as time grew on, he really started thinking about like, well, maybe this is a way to bring in a more general audience to understand what it's like, rather than this smaller population who has gone through this experience and can relate.
Have you thought of upgrading your cinematography game? Would you like to have an ASC cinematographer mentor you for free? Join veteran cinematographer Suki Medenzovic, ASC, Disney, Pixar, FX Networks, Netflix, American Horror Story. As he teaches you how to create beautiful images using 3 lighting techniques he has mastered on film sets over his 30-plus years in the film industry. Each technique uses basic, low-cost lighting equipment so that anyone can achieve beautiful visuals no matter your project's budget. If you want to take your cinematography to the next level, visit filmmakingconversations.com to sign up for instant access.